Welcome to Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. Coming up on the programme this week.
If you were to imagine that you had cling film wrapped tightly around your chest and it's sort of stopping you from taking a good breath, and you're taking these really sort of small, shallow breaths.
And even if I'm having the absolute best time, I will think, right, I really need to leave now. And when I leave, I feel a real sense of relief.
I don't know what I thought anxiety was prior to her saying that. It didn't really click until I actually got the diagnosis.
And I'll be reminding you how you can make connections with mental health organisations within your community. It's Mental Health Monday. The home of the UK's conversation about mental health. Welcome to Mental Health Monday. Thank you for your time. Absolute pleasure to have you with us, and welcome to Mental Health Awareness Week. Back on the podcast this week after what seemed like endless bank holiday Mondays. And it's been a really busy time in the last few weeks as well. So I hope you're well. I hope you're doing well. The days are a lot longer now. The weather seems a lot nicer. It's certainly been warm where I am, and it's been a really busy time. I've had all sorts of stuff going on since the launch of Football Untold, which I told you about just a few weeks ago, and that's been really successful. So thank you to everybody who's made the switch across to that podcast and added it to their playlists. I really appreciate the support that we've had from it. We've had already some really strong feedback from Football Untold, from various people who've listened up and down the country, from MPs and football clubs who've responded to the fact that these are football players talking about their addictions and gambling addictions. So if you do get an opportunity to listen to Football Untold, I'm really proud of it as a series. We've got part 4 of it is out today with the Spurs and former England defender Stephen Colker. You can check that out. Before that, Simon Howarth, who formerly played for Wales. Clark Carlisle's got an episode as well. We've got a player who played in the lower leagues called Sam Wedgbury. It's been a really great series, so thank you for checking it out. That continues as well in the separate Football Untold feed. You can find that where you get your podcasts, or head to footballuntold.co.uk. And now anxiety is the theme of Mental Health Awareness Week this year, and actually anxiety is the UK's most common mental health problem. Now apparently in the last 5 years, around half of us have actually experienced some levels of anxiety, and we may all experience it in slightly different ways. As we're going to be hearing today from Sahara, our guest, she has an experience of anxiety which goes back a number of years, and actually it plays out differently depending on the age that she was and her reaction to it. But I'm sure there's plenty in this conversation which will allow you to identify maybe moments of anxiety that you have. And I'm sure you'll empathise and sympathise with Sahara and the situation she's found herself in, because it is such a common thing. And anxiety can hit us at various different points, sometimes because of sort of feels like the world is sometimes conspiring against you. But at the same time, and Sahara experiences this as well, you can just be sitting there on the couch watching TV, and suddenly there's an anxiety moment that comes upon you and can sometimes feel really, really overwhelming. I'll share a little bit about my own anxiety experience as well as part of this conversation. Now, I was speaking to Sahara because she's involved in the BACP's installation, which was taking place at Waterloo Station in London, the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy, of course, the BACP. Now, what they were doing, they were taking the words that people spoke when describing their anxiety and turned it into AI art, artificial intelligence art. Very clever, generated this art piece from these words to actually put a picture to the words that the people involved actually spoke or wrote down. So I think it's a really interesting idea that's out there in the public and really shines a light on an issue in a way which doesn't use words but actually uses vision, it uses image, it uses public spaces, and it uses artwork to really make a connection with people. Now, if you want to find out some more about the BACP's work on this, or anxiety in general, got a great website for you here, www.bacp.co.uk, and then /anxiety is. Now that's anxiety is as in IS, and that will tell you a little bit more about anxiety, how it might impact you, how it might make you feel, and there are physical and mental repercussions for anxiety as well. So I think that's a really important point. I started off by talking to Sahara about her definition of anxiety, how it makes her feel, and we went on from there.
Honestly, like as soon as you said it, the first thing that came into my mind was like an extreme feeling of unease, because I think that is like the simplest definition and explanation of how I feel when my anxiety is really bad. It's extreme unease. Like I'm unable to relax. My thoughts are all over the place. And yeah, I just don't feel good.
What are those triggers that you notice might spark something like that, or does it have to have a trigger around it?
So yes and no. I definitely do have triggers. Like, so I also have ADHD. Like at the time that I got diagnosed with ADHD, I was also diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. So some of the things around that often trigger my ADHD. So like I have issues with like time blindness. So for example, like if I'm running late to work because of anxiety, ironically enough, that will increase my anxiety. Or if I'm in sort of new, unfamiliar situations or in new situations with new people, that will definitely trigger it. But then other times I could be at home, I could be with my partner just relaxing, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it will just sort of sometimes it'll just hit me, sometimes it will slowly creep up on me. It is really sort of hard to predict. And I guess for that reason, the extreme feeling of unease really sort of explains it quite aptly.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really, really great description. It's interesting as well, the idea that the start of the triggering of an anxiety incident and the effects of it can then make your anxiety worse as well. Does
Yeah.
it feel like that actually, oh, something's happening now, and then you start to worry about it, you start to think about it, then of course other factors kick in, and then suddenly it blows up into a major issue.
Yeah, definitely. Like prior to this, I was a librarian, and you can't work from home as a librarian. So there would be a lot of occasions where I sort of wake up with anxiety, and then I'm getting ready for work, and then I'm feeling more anxious about leaving the flat and going to work, and then it's just building up and building up, and then I'm just thinking, oh God, like I don't want to call in sick. I don't want to let everyone down, and then it just all accumulates. I've been really lucky in my current job because they're putting accommodations for me, so I work hybrid, and it means that if the day that I'm going to go into work, I start feeling anxiety. They've allowed me to sort of come in at lunchtime, so that morning, I don't know why, but I think I experience more anxiety in the mornings than the evenings. So yeah, basically what I'm trying to say is that like yeah, it's it's very difficult. It's hard to predict, and it can just sort of accumulate.
Can I ask you as well, in terms of a diagnosis, does diagnosis when you've got anxiety or when you suffer with anxiety help? Because you can go, oh, it's an anxiety thing. That description that you've just made there of, waking up in the morning and thinking, I can't go to work today. I wonder what is the experience of somebody who does not know that they have anxiety as a diagnosis. This just wakes up in the morning and presumably just thinks, I feel like I can't even cope with the idea of even starting the day. I wonder whether or not this is where that awareness is really crucial. That actually, if you are having those feelings, that actually that is a defined thing.
Yeah.
That when you speak to the right people, they can tell you, and then at least then you understand why you feel like that, and you can put those measures in place as you've managed to do with your current workplace.
Definitely. I would say, I mean, not everyone is in a place to be able to receive like a formal diagnosis, but even just going to your GP alone, they'll have like sort of diagnostic questionnaires to sort of rate your level of anxiety, and they'll be able to actually just, even if they don't say you've got this disorder, they'll be able to sort of give you almost like a measure of that. But I do think it is important to get it, like have the name for it, because I like when I think back to when I was in secondary school in sixth form, and I didn't know that it was anxiety that I was experiencing. I was very harsh on myself. I would be like, I just look at my peers and see how they were coping and they were all doing fine, and it just felt like I was this sort of I was really different. I was a bit weird that I felt such unease about getting up and going in sometimes. I initially attributed it to asthma. I sort of said to my mum, I think I've got asthma. And she was just like, why? And I said, well, I find it really hard to breathe sometimes. And then she sort of went, oh, it's anxiety. And I was just like, I don't know what I thought anxiety was prior to her saying that, but it didn't really click until I actually got the diagnosis. And then I did a bit of reading up on it, and then realizing that a lot of the physical and sort of mental symptoms that I was having wasn't just weird. It could be attributed to anxiety, and yeah, it's allowed me to be a lot more gentle with myself. That's like the biggest thing, and I like giving myself permission to sort of opt out of doing things that might bring me more anxiety. So like if I've got plans to meet up with a friend, and then on the day I'm really not feeling great, I can message them and sort of be like, I'm having a really bad anxiety day, can we reschedule? Whereas in the past I might have just tried to push through it, and sometimes I'd feel better once I've gone to meet them, but other times I might have just made myself feel worse. So yeah, definitely having the language or the understanding definitely helps with that, I think.
Do you think a lot of people go through life now just presuming that this is just what life is and how they feel? That it isn't a diagnosable thing and it isn't a mental health issue. They just think, you know what, I just can't cope. Like life is coming at me, and I'm not able to deal with it. Do you think that maybe that might be the experience of a lot of people?
I definitely think so. Especially if you've been dealing with it for a long time, because I think the longer you've been dealing with it, the longer you've sort of almost gotten used to it, and gotten used to just sort of excusing it or ignoring it. And it's more tempting to just keep on like ignoring it, and like what I said earlier, like looking around at other people that you work with, or people in your family, your friends, seeing that they're coping with things and that you're not, like that almost sort of makes it a little bit worse. And you just think to myself, okay, I just need to push myself to get on with things. Like there's no time to really be caught up in this feeling.
Yeah, obviously, we're talking about something from a mental health point of view, anxiety. What are those physical things, Sahara, that you experience that come around when anxiety is a factor? What physically, how does it affect you?
So like what I mentioned earlier about the asthma feeling, that's always I not always, I'd say maybe since I was about 15, I started experiencing like tightness of my chest. So for like the AI illustration, I said it feels like cling film is wrapped around my chest, because it was, I've never really tried to think about it in sort of metaphorical terms, but it's, if you were to imagine that you had cling film wrapped tightly around your chest and it's sort of stopping you from taking a good breath, and you're taking these really sort of small shallow breaths, and it's just not enough to well, it's not enough. But also sort of like sort of stereotypical symptoms like shaky hands, feeling a bit sweaty, sort of sometimes heart palpitations, which I think in the case of that is really important to go to your GP just to make sure that it isn't anything else. I don't know if I could count it as a physical symptom, but racing thoughts is definitely one of them. And also hot flushes, actually. I think I experience that more when I'm in public and I'm feeling anxiety. And it's just like, yeah, a feeling of like hotness just sort of spreading down your body, and that sort of in turn makes you feel a bit more sweatier. And then I don't know, I think the symptoms compound each other a lot, because once you start noticing things, you become more aware of it, and then yeah, I think it increases the anxiety.
I think that the hot flush one that's something I've experienced, where you go, and it normally comes from a place where you're in a bit of a rush, and maybe
Yeah,
you would naturally be a little bit warm here, and then suddenly you start thinking, oh, actually no, I'm really warm. Oh, I'm gonna have to, but you can't. You've got to sit in a meeting. Next thing you know, you build yourself up. You're absolutely pouring with sweat. People are talking to you, and you're literally like wiping you, and you're thinking, oh my word, like, get me out of this room as quickly
yeah,
as possible. And I've had over many years that feeling of, and I still get it now, that get me out of this room as quickly as possible. So like, anything like you've got to go and sit on a plane, I'll always want to be like the last person sitting down, because then
yeah.
that's the shortest amount of time I've got to sit for, sometimes half an hour in a chair with nothing happening. Or if I ever go to like a theater or the cinema, put me on the end so I can either get out or leave. Or like the trailer start, I'll always nip to the toilet then, because I'll be like, right, just get me out of this
Yeah.
space. And it's one of those things where I'm thinking, Anyone else is just sitting in they're ready to, they're in the middle of the aisle. And I'm thinking, don't you dare sit on that end seat, because I need that seat. Like that, the idea of having to sit, like I'd rather almost like not go in than have to go in and then sit there, knowing that I would be absolutely fine. But just at the back of my mind, the anxiety would be saying, you're not sitting on the end. What if you do need to get out? And as soon as you start thinking, what if you do need to get out? You start making up reasons in your head about why
you might need to
get out. And for me, that's often been like, because you need the toilet, or you might need to go to the loo, and you have to go past people, and it'd be awkward, and you have to, excuse me, and shuffle down, and it'd just be so awkward that it sort of builds up, and it becomes sort of a really consuming thing, because you then realize that you've not been watching the film because you've been too busy thinking about all these other sort of factors in place. And I sometimes wonder, is anyone else thinking this? Like, is anyone else in this cinema, or is anyone else in this space thinking, I really want to get out of here? Just to walk out and then just to come back in would be absolutely fine. But just this idea of, I'm not in total control of the situation.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of those things around anxiety, which we don't quite get a handle of. We just presume it's, that's just how you feel about that, or you don't like being in enclosed spaces, and sometimes people put it down to other factors as well. But no, it's a real experience for me. You mentioned as well, when you were younger as well. I mean, obviously, when you're a teenager in particular, you're going through all sorts of different changes anyway, and your hormones are all over the place. When the anxiety kicked in, were there any things or any moments you remember from like back in school where you sort of, your anxiety played a big part, and you suddenly realized that there was something else going on?
It's not a huge thing, but definitely when I mean, this is looking back on it now, when I was in primary school, I think from about the age of 3, I bit my nails up until about 15. And like my mum tried all the different like things to try and get me to stop biting them, like putting that horrible tasting stuff on my nails. Never worked. But it wasn't until like I got a bit older, I was like, oh, like that was how I coped with my anxiety, biting my nails. And even just sort of, I can think of in secondary school, and a bit ways after secondary school, like going to visit friends and things like that. Sometimes I would literally just sort of like towards the end of the night, I would get up and just leave, and people would be looking for me, and I could never explain why I felt the need to leave, but I think it would be like a mixture of just anxiety building up, and tiredness, and it's like, now looking back, it's like, okay, I understand why I do that now. So now I can sort of be like to people, oh well, yeah, I've reached my limit now, so I'm going, rather than just sort of slinking off. But yeah, even I moved to a different sixth form from the secondary school I was in, and a lot of the time, if I didn't see my friends in the common room, I'd sort of peep through the window, and then I would just walk around for a bit until I saw them, because the thought of going into the common room and then sort of having to make small talk, or not having anyone to talk to, that would literally, I would start having the hot flushes, and I'd start building it up in my mind, like sort of what you said, like about the cinema. I just keep thinking about it until I talked myself out of going into there.
You just made me realize there, Sahara, that I am such a slinker. It's like time to leave. And even if I'm having the absolute best time, I will think, right, I really need to leave now. And when I leave, I feel a real sense of relief. And I don't even like, if I'm just there walking, I feel like a relief. And I was having a great time, and all my friends were there. But I almost feel like it's that thing. It's easier to leave than to be left behind. So that idea that better that I leave now on my terms.
Exactly. Yeah.
There, and then people go, oh, people are leaving. Why are people leaving? Where are they going? Are they going somewhere else? Whereas if I just take myself away from that situation and that environment, it makes me feel so much better. Yeah, there's a lot of this conversation resonated with myself. Hey, let's talk about this collaboration now between yourself, a group of people, and the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy, because some people will have seen this already. Some people may see it at Waterloo Station, this AI art exhibition and installation that you mentioned before. The idea of you can type in anything now into these AI machines and they produce pieces of artwork for you. First and foremost, you mentioned that sort of cling film around the chest idea. When you type that into a machine and you're presented with a piece of art that represents that, How did that feel when you saw it? Did you think, wow? Did you think, goodness me? Did you think, wow, some artists are going to be out of work very quickly because now computers are doing some incredible things?
Um, it wasn't necessarily what I expected to see, but then to be fair, I don't think I had a clear image of what I was expecting to see. It's it's always been really hard to put what anxiety feels like into words. So when I had like the initial meeting and I was trying to come up with metaphors, I was thinking to myself like, what would this look like? And then when I was shown the images, I thought the first thing I thought was, yeah, this isn't what I expected. But then I thought like, wow, this does illustrate it, not perfectly, but it illustrates it very well, because that's like the symptom that really got me thinking about anxiety. It was really like cathartic to see it actually sort of in a visual form, because obviously anxiety, you can't see anxiety. So in a way, this is allowing people to see what anxiety can look like for people, which I think it's impressive, and it's really important, because again, it's not something that you can see. Like if you were to have, I don't know, measles popped into my head, you can see the measles, but like anxiety, it's literally all in your head.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? In terms of Mental Health Awareness Week, is a week where sometimes people are like, "Oh, there's a thing on. What's this about?" Whereas if it was you trying to shout at people as they walk past about what feelings of
Yeah,
anxiety are, they'd be like, "Oh, well," like. Whereas actually, just an image might make people stop and think, "Oh, what's this image about?"
yeah,
And then just a sense of, "Oh," and then it's that picture speaks 1,000 words. So much
exactly.
of that comes into the conversation, and I really hope with things like this that these visual representations of these sort of these mental health issues that often live just within somebody's mind just brings it out into the fore. So like you could look at a picture and it can be of someone who's obviously struggling, or there's pictures of, head full of marbles and things like that as part of it. You go like, you could look at that and go, do you ever feel like that? And someone would then use their own perception of what they're seeing to think, oh, actually, yeah, I understand what's going on here, that you feel like you're all over the place, or that you
Yeah,
feel like I think that's why things like art, beyond public service messaging and the medical side of things, art can really play a part in the mental health world in a way that it can't really play in the physical health world. Often people say if you broke your leg, you'd know to go to the ambulance. Whereas actually, if you broke your leg, no one's going to say, "Oh, draw me a picture of this to
yeah,
explain what it feels like." Whereas actually, for anxiety, we can embrace these much wider societal things to hopefully tell these stories.
yeah. I think it's really interesting because, as you said, like people will think about it like in relation to them, and even if that person that's seen it themselves isn't experienced that or hasn't experienced that, they might know a friend or family that have mentioned something similar. But either way, it does give you like that thing to stop and pause and think. Um, and like what we sort of said earlier about a lot of people who might just sort of be plodding along and just trying to ignore it or excusing it or whatever, they might be thinking to themselves, "Oh, that's what anxiety feels like. I feel that myself." And yeah, I'm hoping that not that people have anxiety, but that people that are suffering from anxiety in silence will see this and sort of take the steps that they need to try and like get help and mitigate it any way they can.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the other thing is that people seeing anxiety framed within a piece of artwork within a major transport hub in one of the world's great cities, it tells you that actually it's worthy of its place. Like this is an important enough issue to have a piece of art outside Waterloo Station. You know what? It's not like a thing that we're hiding away. It's a thing which is coming front and center. I think that's the other thing, that this is clearly an issue. It says to people, this is a thing which is important enough for the members of the public to see on a daily basis. And I think that can be really huge as well, potentially, in terms of opening up that conversation. What do you hope that people take from it?
I mean, I hope that, again, like I said, people sort of recognize that are suffering, recognize it or recognize it for other people, and to try and get help. I've been in counselling before with a BACP registered therapist, and I was going through a really rough time, admittedly, but I think that therapy is useful for anyone at any time in their life. But definitely people that are experiencing anxiety, I think it's important to have someone that's qualified to talk about it, because I mean, even if you talk to family and friends, I think therapists will give you tools, really valuable tools to deal with the anxiety and to work through it. And I've gained a lot of like useful tools as well, and it's sort of helped me reframe some of my anxious thoughts, which has been really useful as well.
Yeah, there's a great website, by the way, bacp.co.uk/anxiety is, where you can find out some more information about sort of how you might feel, and then obviously where you can get support and speak to a counsellor, and and hopefully take that step as well from the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy. And I think as well, it would be great if you could go in and say, I saw a picture and it made me feel like this, or it could be I heard a song and that song makes me feel a certain way, rather than you thinking, right, how do I describe thoughts in my head, or how do I describe these? Do I feel comfortable describing the physical symptoms? I think maybe just becoming more aware of this as an issue might allow you to find the words to communicate what it is you're experiencing. So hopefully with a counsellor or a therapist, put through to the very core of like where this issue comes from.
Yeah. And also another thing to remember with like a qualified therapist is that they're literally there to not judge you, whereas you might feel a bit of a ways like speaking to your partner or your friends or your family, worrying that what they're going to think of you, whereas a therapist is literally there to help you, so that you might have it initially going in, but like as you go through the sessions you realize they're literally there to help you. They're not going to be like judging you for anything that you say, and it's literally like one of the most safe places to talk about those feelings.
Brilliant stuff. Well, congratulations on your involvement in the project. I'm sure lots of people will see it outside Waterloo Station as well. And fingers crossed it'll make those connections, and urge people to get support. We'll do some signposting now through bacp.co.uk/anxiety is, where you can find out more information about anxiety, how it makes you feel, and of course the steps that you can take. That's the website, bacp.co.uk. Sahara, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you've enjoyed this week's podcast. Thanks for checking out Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Mick Coyle. You can also find me, Mick Coyle, on Facebook as well. Don't forget, if you want to speak to somebody about your mental health, you can do so. The Samaritans, free to call on 116 123. You can find mental health services where you are. Just look for the Hub of Hope. Type in your postcode. It'll find those mental health services close to you. And for support in a crisis, you can text SHOUT to 85258. That's if you're experiencing a personal crisis, you're unable to cope and need support. Shout to 85258. That's a text line. Do get involved in those services. In an absolute emergency, always remember the number to call is 999. Thanks for downloading the podcast this week. We'll be back next week with more Mental Health Monday.